Dear all, it's a great pleasure for me today to introduce a very interesting discussion, I think, as how to provide guidance on alternative smoking products to adult smokers amid controversy and change. Why is that so important? I think because we are in a very strange period in which it's the first time we start having this risk reduction or concept, products that harm, but they harm much less than the usually used smoke products. And we are in the very difficult ethically point in which can a doctor say use something that can hurt you, because if you compare it with what you are really every day using, it's much better. Or is it better to be stiff and say, I don't accept any of them, just stop? You know, life is not black and white, and we will have a very interesting discussion with six very important guests. I would like to start with Peter Harper, a medical oncologist from the United Kingdom. Professor Harper, please, two words about your relationship with smoking cessation and tell us in 5 minutes your opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dimitri, and what a great pleasure to be with you and how much I enjoyed listening yesterday. So harm reduction is really at the center of what doctors do and what we've all done all our lives in one way or another, whether it's screening or whether it's advice or whether it's making sure that we minimize what happens in everyday life to a patient. We control hypertension, we control diabetes. It's what we do. So I'm a medical oncologist, one of the earlier NHS oncologists within the health service rather than an academic unit. And we built Guy's Kingston Thomas's Hospital up to be a very major oncology unit. I started my work really in small cell lung cancer all those 4 or 5 decades ago, partly due to the fact that in the area where I worked and lived in London, we'd had very major tobacco factories, cigarette factories, and as part and parcel of the policy of the factory, free cigarettes were given to staff. And of course, what we saw was this major problem with small cell lung cancer. So let's look at the next slide. So what is the impact of combustion science on policy? And this is really where we are now into a political as well as a scientific discussion. So if we look down the first column, we look at combustible cigarettes. We know that there's still 1 billion cigarette smokers left in the world, despite all the processes we've made for trying to reduce tobacco combustion smoking. We know that at the temperatures that are reached in a cigarette, combustible cigarette, that we have around 6,000 chemicals and that 100 or thereabouts cause disease, and that's well known. And that though you smoke for the nicotine, you get the damage due to the tars. They're highly toxic, and we've all seen the results of that toxicity. And it's estimated that there are 8 million deaths a year due to combustible tobacco cigarette smoking. So what about smoke-free products? And we look at the science of smoke-free products. It's relatively low, the uptake, around 70 million users now, 55 million roughly at e-cigarettes, 15 million with heated tobacco products. We know that if you heat the tobacco rather than combust it, there are significantly fewer and lower levels of chemicals and toxicity, with reduced toxicity, both in vitro and in vivo. As yet, we have to keep saying there's no long-term evidence that reducing the toxicant exposure will lead to reduce disease, but it's likely that that will happen. And we do have examples of that. If we look at policy, however, we have a lot of policy interfering with what I would call science, where we need to control both policy and make sure that the science is clear. So countries with bans include Bhutan, which bans combustible cigarettes, but the remaining countries don't ban combustible cigarettes. We have 33 countries banning e-cigarettes, and we also have countries banning heated tobacco products. Many countries don't differentiate between heated tobacco products and e-cigarettes, and they recommend the same or similar duties and difficulties with this potentially reduced toxicity product compared to the combustible cigarette. So if we look at somewhere which, by an anomaly really, when it joined the EU, if we look at Sweden and Snus, made by Swedish Match. So Snus is a pouch of tobacco which is kept in the mouth, and it is pasteurized, and it does seem to have much lower toxicity. But let's look at the left-hand part of this slide first. The prevalence of daily smoking and snus use in Sweden, 63 to 2016. What you can see in the blue line, the highest line to start with, is smoking males. The red line is smoking females. And then you see on the green line, snus use in males, and the red and the orange line, snus use in females. And what you can see is that with snus, which delivers the nicotine, you have a decrease in your smoking rates in men, which has continued and gone from 50% and is now down towards just under 10%. You see with a slightly later take up of snus in females that the rise in tobacco use, combustible tobacco use, has also now fallen to very similar levels to those in males. Snus use, interestingly, has remained pretty stable in males at just under 20% and in females at just under 8%. So if you look at the right-hand slide, you can see that the prevalence of daily smoking in the EU, you can see Sweden has 5%, and as you can see, the median for the EU 28 is 24%, and you can see the extremes above and below. So smoking, combustible smoking, can be reduced. Now, has that had an effect? Because we now have long enough to see whether snus use compared to tobacco use may have made a difference. Now, this is comparing nations, which is always a difficult thing to do. However, if you look all over, if you look at the EU 28, you can see that the attributable rate for tobacco all-cause death is 152 per 100,000 in Sweden and is 373 as a median in the EU, and 699 and over 600 in both Latvia and Hungary. So it does look as though snus use has had an effect, which you can now see, which you cannot see with the heated tobacco products and with e-cigarettes, because of course they just haven't had long enough yet to see. So how has snus use been accepted by policymakers? So the USA FDA decision in 2019 came out with a modified risk tobacco product order. The claim was using general snus instead of cigarettes puts you at a lower risk of mouth cancer, heart disease, lung cancer, stroke, emphysema, and chronic bronchitis. A similar decision, which was asked for by the EU and in 2018, was reported again as a ban. And the EU court stands by the ban on Swedish Match-produced products, snus. So what you can see is that policy makers across the world are interpreting the science, and I do think that the Swedish data is science, in different ways. And I would say that we need to ask that nations do look at science and make policy based on science. So we come to the decision, is harm reduction ethical for a doctor? Well, of course, it is, and we do it. And we do it in everyday life, and we've always done it. So when you look at the core values of the Hippocratic Oath, the best interest of the patient to protect the patient and its privacy. So patients deserve the best available. In theory, a lifestyle change is the best way of making this happen, but it's difficult. In reality, lifestyle changes are very difficult to make. So you have to look at harm reduction and acknowledge the patient's values as a strength, not a weakness. Accept people's freedom to choose unhealthy behaviors, whether they drive fast cars or drink more than they should, but aim to reduce the harms by science, by innovation and alternatives. And the doctors must focus on providing their patients with their best care. So, as every speaker will say, all things are poisonous, be it everything from exercise to all the good things in life, and there's nothing without poison. It's only the dose which makes the thing poisonous. So quitting tobacco smoking is by far the best option, and we all say the same thing there. But perhaps for those that cannot quit, innovation in harm reduction can save lives. We don't have the facts yet for what we're talking about, but it looks as though we're probably right with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Harper. Very interesting point of view and giving us data from Snus, which really is the best available in European Union. I would like to continue with Professor Cambronero, oncology surgeon of head and neck. Please, Professor, if you can keep the time of 5 minutes, that would be great in order to be able to discuss also at the end.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Richter, for your introduction, and greeting you all from Costa Rica. I think Dr. Harper set up everything the right way for what I'm going to say. I'm going to actually give a more personal perspective and experience about this very provocative topic, as it is counseling of adult smokers on alternative tobacco products. As you all know, this is perhaps nowadays one of the hottest debates in the field of tobacco. Sometimes even gets very emotional, when you discuss this with other colleagues. Part of the debate, I think, stems from the fact that the literature on harm reduction and alternative tobacco products is very mixed and sometimes confusing for both the public and the medical community as well. And definitive conclusions as to if it improves the tobacco-related morbidity and mortality are still pending. So recommendations sometimes become very contentious. So let me tell you what my experience throughout the years has been on how I reconcile and adapted the dilemma of advising smokers on alternative tobacco products. For me, as an oncologist, this is less of a dilemma when a cancer patient who smokes comes through my office door. I believe everyone in this meeting would agree, just as Dr. Harper said, that that to reduce the morbidity and mortality induced by tobacco, quitting is the best and the most effective alternative that any smoker or tobacco user could have. So as a surgical oncologist who basically sees patients whose cancer 85% of the times is induced by tobacco, it was in the beginning of my career very frustrating and annoying when the patient was reluctant to give up smoking in spite of knowing that he or she was seeing me due to a smoking consequence in the first place. Over the years, I came to realize that quitting smoking is easier said than done. In fact, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services reported a quit success rate at 1 year as low as 3 to 5%. Most cigarette smokers relapse within 1 year. And this also happens to head and neck cancer patients who, according to a literature review and meta-analysis published by the University of Kentucky and the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, about 30% of head and neck cancer patients and lung cancer patients continue smoking in spite of their diagnosis. So nevertheless, I adhere to the principles that stop smoking cold turkey is on the cancer patient best interest. So I use everything at my disposal to help my cancer patients quit. I spend time explaining that if they continue smoking, the oncologic outcomes and acute and chronic side effects from chemotherapy and radiation will be negatively affected. I'm also very liberal at prescribing nicotine replacement therapy products and FDA-approved non-nicotine containing drugs such as bupropion and varenicline. Patients also are followed up in a cessation clinic that is run by a psychologist with whom we work very closely. But again, as a healthcare providers, we should do everything possible to prevent our young people and non-smokers from smoking initiation and help already established smokers to quit, even more if they have already cancer. However, during one's medical practice, you come across patients with different personalities, some of them hedonistic, who find great pleasure at the smoking, and they just do not want to quit, no matter what. They, even if they have had cancer, some patients express that they enjoy smoking. So, there are also patients who want to quit, but they just can't. They don't have the strength. They don't have the willpower to stop smoking. They are very addicted. So these two groups of smokers or patients, which are encompassed by what has been called hardcore smokers or hardened smokers, who are the smokers unwilling or unable to quit, despite well-informed knowledge of the health consequences of tobacco and social disapproval. When you identify this group of patients who are continuously being exposed to tremendous dangers, then all of a sudden, at least for me, the big conundrum and dilemma posed by the first do not harm concept becomes clearer and less complicated despite the confusing literature, and is when I realized time is up to have a face-to-face conversation with the patient. If they still want to continue the cessation.
Sorry, yeah. One more minute, please. We're out of time.
Yeah, well, I am not done. So if they still want to continue cessation attempts without tobacco harm reduction alternatives, we as the primary care givers should keep supporting them. But if they explicitly manifest no desire whatsoever to stop smoking because they just get too much enjoyment or they just gave up at cessation, then I do believe non-combustible tobacco products becomes a better alternative for them over combustible tobacco. All right, so that's just basically my approach. I try to stick to what has been recommended by the WHO. But those hardcore smokers who don't want to quit, I usually offer them tobacco harm reduction alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Carbonero. Just one question. Costa Rica, is the alternative smoking like e-cigarettes or heat non-burn devices, are they on the market? Are they used extensively? Or how?
Yeah, they are in the market. They are not very popular. According to GATT, the Global Adult Tobacco Survey, 8.9% of Costa Ricans are smokers. of those people who use alternative tobacco products, e-cigarettes is the most popular, but it's just 1.6% of people, according to the 2015 GATS report.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
I would like to pass to Professor Clemente, an emeritus professor of otorhinolaryngology in Porto, and which in a normal period when somebody was traveling still. I was in a congress 2 years ago, and I have to say it's one of the most beautiful cities I have seen, Porto in Portugal. I loved it. And he was a chairman of the National Council for Smoking Prevention in Portugal. Let's hear him, please. Professor.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my pleasure to participate in this panel and to be included as one of the members that you have mentioned related with my practice in the past. I will make a very short story of what I believe it's the right direction to go at this time. It's known that burn prevention and cessation initiatives have resulted in a substantial decrease of tobacco smoking. But unfortunately, those policies do not get absolute results. During the last 5 decades of my medical practice, I have been following all the recommendations and guidelines from national and international health authorities. And because of these insufficient results, I have switched to harm reduction. A worldwide number of public health experts and clinicians like myself believe in harm reduction as a complementary policy to smoke prevention and cessation. I don't have time to present to you and to the other colleagues and the audience some recent independent studies and reports referring that we have achieved better results with tobacco smoking eating products versus traditional burning cigarettes. And please, don't come to me with the classical argument that you need more time for long studies, because nowadays toxicological studies can perfectly perform the job giving the right information on time. However, I would like to stress the United States official agency, FDA, Food and Drug Administration, leading role in this matter, approving last July 2020 its modified risk products MRTP marketing authorization of first nicotine product and acknowledging a tobacco eating system. As you have mentioned, I've been working in the United States for 5 years during my residency training in head and neck. And because of that, I do believe the FDA is a very difficult agency, and you have to submit our data, and specifically clinical evidence is very important for them. They are a very tough and difficult agency. So I believe FDA, not because I was there in Boston 72, 77, but I believe FDA. So in conclusion, considering the scientific evidence on decreased risk of tobacco eating products, considering my previous long experience on tobacco smoking prevention and cessation, where I tried everything, considering my personal opinion after trying everything for patient care to reduce tobacco consumption, considering the public interest on harm reduction. So I think it's very important. You should consider that. I'm in a position to speak out in favor of harm reduction with the following declarations. Number one, there will always be people engaged in risk behaviors, as we know, no matter what you do to help themselves. Number two, we should follow the recommendation of most influential health authorities, like, as I mentioned, FDA, related with non-combustible products and modified risk tobacco products, MRTP. Number three, we should place the smokers in the center of our actions. That means in the center of harm reduction, like we are doing for patient-centered medicine. Number four, and last, we should support the creation of a new worldwide organization dealing with harm reduction and its relation with tobacco smoking to promote education, research, and medical care, to organize meetings and to publish national and international information. I just want to conclude and mention to you that I have important positions in some international associations. And I do believe this is very important, have an association related with harm reduction as you plan in this magnific section on, and of course, Congress on Third Scientific Congress on Harm Reduction.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think this was a very clear declaration of the beliefs. And I think that so far we are, all the positions we have heard are on the same direction, that it's much better to have less risk than not being able at all to have a risk reduction in the percentage of people who are not able to stop smoking. But I would like to hear at this point a specialist of internal medicine, asthma and allergy from Poland, Professor Piotr Kuna, to see his opinion about that.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen with you. Can you see the screen?
Yes, excellent.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this interesting meeting. And I was very pleased to listen to excellent presentation of Professor Harper, which has shown the schizophrenia, which is between the policy and the research and science. Science shows what is good, but the policy is not able to adopt this scientific approach. In Poland, we have decided that we have to take this problem into our hands, and we have started, I would say, grassroots movement to introduce the harm reduction policy into general practice. Of course, this is truism that the tobacco is the main cause of many pulmonary diseases, including COPD and lung cancer, and also that smoking is a cause of the decline in lung function, and the lung function, especially the forced expiratory volume, is one of the best parameters which can indicate the longevity and our health. This is from the Framingham study. And Fletcher and Piotr published in British Medical Journal in 1997 a graph which has shown that stopping smoking at any point has some benefits for our health. At the same time, we have studied the COPD and look at which moment is the best option to stop smoking or to introduce treatment. And at the beginning of COPD, so-called GOLD 1 and GOLD 2, this is COPD mild and moderate, the lung decline is the fastest. So we think that we should start treatment of patients with COPD not at the end stage of disease, but at the beginning and at the early diagnosis. And truly speaking, we have found in the literature only one good paper published in Annals of Internal Medicine 15 years ago. It was a randomized clinical trial, the effect of smoking cessation intervention on almost 15-year mortality in patients with COPD. There were two groups of patients, one group almost 4,000 patients, and the second almost 2,000. The 4,000 patient group received the intervention, smoking cessation advice, medication, whatsoever, everything what is on the market for almost 15 years. The second group was no intervention, just the usual care. And after 14 years, we have found that only 22% of patients quit smoking. So this shows our failure. Almost 14 years, very hard work on the smoking cessation and intervention. And only every patient out of 5 was able to quit smoking. Also, we have seen the difference, which is almost 1 year between the lifespan of person who quit smoking versus those which were under usual care. But what is more interesting is on the left panel. If you can see, it shows mortality or death rates from different diseases, coronary heart disease, lung cancer, other cancers, respiratory disease, and other. And as you can see, there are 3 groups of patients. Sustained quitters, this is the white bars, intermittent quitters, person who quit and return, so many intervention, but some success, and continuing smoking. And you see that, of course, the best results we receive in sustained quitters. But even if you stop smoking for a while, like coronary artery disease, you see, or the lung cancer, you see that the incidence of deaths was significantly lower. So this shows us that any approach and any outcome of this intervention is beneficial for patients. So, of course, once again, we would like to say that the best way is to stop smoking, and we can, in this case, maintain the function of lungs. In Poland, there are 2 doctors' organizations and the expert group opinion together review all available research on harm reduction. And in heart and vascular disease, last year, we have published in the prevention section, I'm sorry, this is in Polish publication, but I will show you the expert opinion group on heat not burn tobacco products and patient health. And as you can see, in all patients which smoke, of course, we should advise that they don't smoke. We also have some special outpatient clinic who advise and take care of patients who smoke. We have, of course, nicotine replacement therapy. Also, we have medication like bupropion, varenicline, citizen. And finally, if nothing helps, and the patient still is willing to smoke, we advise that doctors should recommend heat not burn tobacco. And we believe that this advice will significantly reduce the mortality because we have growing number of data, maybe not strong, but growing number of data, that this is really efficacy. This year, the Society of the Civilization Diseases, this is another society which also consider many civilization diseases, including tobacco smoking, including diseases related to air pollution, which is also a major problem, change this recommendation and put after the doctor's advice, citizen, because in Poland, citizen is very cheap, it's over the counter, it's just 25 days treatment, it costs less than 10 euro, so it's available for every person. And we have now growing number of patients who start tobacco, fight with the tobacco dependence, taking citizen, which is quite safe medication. And the origin of citizen is the herbal medicine. It's not a synthetic medicine. And of course, also the Civilization Society recommend the heat not burn tobacco system for patients in which all this pharmacotherapy, nicotine replacement therapy, psychological advice is not effective to adopt. And my conclusion is that I would suggest that we should just adopt similar recommendation as the society during this meeting. Of course, every society should review and consider. And I agree with Professor Harper and his last sentence that the best way is to just stop smoking. But 1/3 population has in a psychological profile. They are not able to stop any risky behavior like smoking, drinking, driving without seatbelts, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kuna. Very interesting approach, confirming, let's say, the whole idea that everybody, I think, is quite concurrent on that. Two more persons I would like to hear. Professor Schedel, a specialist on disease prevention from Hungary. Please, Professor, can we hear also you? Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the technical disturbances. Briefly, what I would like to thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you that I can say some words about the Hungarian situation now. We started the harm reduction ID a little bit later than the other countries. Actually, the products what we can use for harm reduction, the heated products, e-cigarettes and others, are only went to the market in the last years. So most of the Hungarian citizens bought these kind of things from abroad, but now you can use these products in the tobacco shops. So it's something which is quite new. But the medical society has not really clear ideas that what is the options of the harm reduction, what are these drugs, how can we use the heated tobaccos, how can we use the e-cigarettes. So we are trying to follow all of your ideas because the aim is the same, that trying to do something with the patients who has some kind of other backgrounds of diseases. So some key words that the number of the lung cancer in Hungary, one of the highest in Europe. The number of the COPD is one of the highest in Europe. We are the most obese country in Europe, and the shortest estimated life period we had in Europe, and the longest period of time with diseases, it's in Hungary. So it's a good start to do some kind of harm reduction programs. What we are trying to do now, we launching a harm reduction society in Hungary in this moment. And first of all, we are targeting for the caregivers, the medical staff. It's a kind of training of trainers program or an ID, because most of our GPs and a big part of the other doctors has not really clear ID about the not only the tobacco, not only the e-cigarettes, that some other things which could really helpful for harm reduction. So this is how we are now. The other one is we are trying to give ideas for the society, that what is the place of these products. So we can say that we are following your countries because we started a little bit later. The price of the products are the same that the normal tobacco products. And now we are in the middle that we are collecting for colleagues, the medical doctors and caregiver staffs, to give them ideas, what are the best opinions to make programs for citizens, for the ill people. This is how the situation in Hungary in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's very important the way you approach it, to try to educate doctors on harm reduction. It's a completely new medical concept, and I think that needs to be discussed and discussed again. It remembers me like what happened with statins 35 years ago, when everybody was saying, yes, it's interesting, but who knows what harm it does. So I don't say these products are statins, but it's a new concept and things that we need to learn better, and we need to know how and when to use them. I would like to close the first round with Professor Toumbis, President of the Cyprus Institute of Respiratory Diseases, and a member of the Committee Against Smoking and of the New Smoking Products of the Ministry of Health. Professor, what do you think about this, please?
Thank you, Dr. Richter. After the...
Δεν σας ακούμε καθόλου. Δεν σας ακούμε.
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I said after the excellent introduction done by all the previous speakers, I will present you my approach to the smokers who are considering using alternative nicotine delivery systems. There are a number of reasons that they give for using ENDS. To quit smoking, help reduce the amount of tobacco smoked, but not stop completely, and give it a try. So my guidance about ENDS are largely depend upon the smoker status, health status, previous unsuccessful quit attempts, as well as patient preferences. First of all, I always emphasize to the smoker the importance of the goal of complete smoking cessation. Even a single cigarette per day increases respiratory and cardiovascular risk. If the smoker failed in the past to quit smoking, I recommend to him to use evidence-based smoking cessation aids again, which are known to be safe and effective, with full support by me or by any specialist in smoking cessation or by smoking cessation clinic. In a discussion with him about ENDS, I cover the following points usually. The toxic constituents of cigarettes are due to the combustion of tobacco. ENDS are systems that heat a nicotine-containing liquid or heat non-burned tobacco, producing an aerosol that differs from the smoke produced by burning tobacco. Most reviews of toxicological, clinical, and epidemiological evidence indicate that the chemicals found in ENDS, when used as intended, are far fewer and well below levels seen in cigarette smoke. So, ENDS expose the user to fewer and lower levels of toxic compounds than smoking a cigarette does. Of course, the use of ENDS poses a risk, but if used as complete substitute for combustible tobacco products, they are expected to be less harmful than them in short term. Because ENDS are new products, their long-term safety is uncertain. In addition, scientific information about their health effects and effectiveness to help smokers quit is limited. They are not currently approved by any authority as safe and effective cessation aids, except in United Kingdom. If smoker chooses to use e-cigarettes in order to quit smoking, I assure him that I'm going to help him. I provide him the following advices: to switch completely to ENDS, to avoid dual use of both combustible tobacco products and ENDS. I emphasize that the eventual goal is cessation of ends as well as combustible cigarettes because of uncertainty about ends' long-term health risks. After stopping combustible tobacco, we must plan to taper the use of e-cigarettes by the smoker and to use approved device, fluids and flavors, child-proof packaging to minimize the risk of nicotine poisoning of children and avoid using ends around children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Toumbis. And I think it's very important, as all of you mentioned, that first, as doctors, we start thinking about risk reduction. And the second part, which I realized that the majority of you mentioned, is the importance that agencies like FDA make a statement, and agencies that could be EMA, which is not really responsible on this. And here I think you have a European gap, but someone which can see all the scientific data, have a rigorous scientific protocol, and be able to comment on a European level that I believe this product is able for risk reduction or not. And I think that's something we are missing on a regulatory point of view, because as far as I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, only FDA has in its mandate also the smoking products to evaluate them scientifically. EMA does not have, and I don't think there is a regulatory affair for smoking. Since we have 10 minutes and it's 6 people, I would like to ask all of you for a short final comment after you heard all of the presenters, and if you would have something as a closing remark, please. Let's start the way we started. Maybe Professor Harper would like to begin again.
Thank you so very much, Dimitri. Yes, I think what we've all come at this from different directions, which is what a roundtable should be. I think that we all agree the long-term evidence isn't there, but we would all agree that the science is pointing that surrogates can work. And yesterday's meetings perhaps pointed at both the vascular surrogates and the other surrogates as being good indicators of what might happen. So I think we can conclude that there is evidence that two things. One is that these reduced risk products probably will reduce risk. We don't know for sure. That we can use as an example other products, for instance, Snus, and that we can actually say that we also believe it's quite a useful tool for actually helping quitting as a halfway house for those that need it, with all that goes with the hands and the mouth and everything else to do with these products. So quitting just with a patch is one thing. Quitting which allows you to use all the everyday events of smoking may also help for some. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Harper. Professor Cambronero. We will go back to Professor Cambronero.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. After listening to your talks, I realized that we in Latin America are a little bit behind with the concept of tobacco harm reduction. I think in Europe, the concept has taken up. Perhaps that's my impression. I think in Latin America still, and mostly in Costa Rica, that's something that we have just started to engage. Being a developing countries, where the burden, the financial burden of tobacco death, is extremely this is huge. And I'm convinced that by implementing tobacco harm reduction and tobacco, alternative, mainly e-cigarettes, we might start looking at diminishing in that mortality. So thank you very much. I have actually learned from you guys by listening to your talks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Clemente. Sorry, Professor Clemente, you are mute. You need to open the mute button. Can you repeat?
Okay, can you hear now?
Yes, very nicely.
Okay, very good. Now, I was saying that here in Portugal, my colleagues are doing a good job, particularly those that are interested on tobacco smoking, and they are decreasing the numbers, and the figures that we have now is about close to 20%. So I do congratulate my colleagues for their achievement, because this is the area where everybody is concerned, and particularly medical doctors are interested. Now, number two, we have two ways of working related with tobacco smoke with smokers. Number one, we have to work on products presented by the tobacco industry. I think that's the future. Why I'm saying that? Because I know they can reduce, and they are able to reduce because of the important research and development. They are reducing the toxic irritants and carcinogens in about 89%, and this is the future. And also related with the tobacco smoking clinics. I've done that, and I continue to do so. But tobacco smoking clinics, the results are very poor. As I mentioned at the beginning, very insufficient. That's why we need something else. We need something new. And I believe that these alternative products, and I do believe that harm reduction will be the future. But no matter what you do, you will always have smokers in life. We cannot be so optimistic that give up smoking. We have to have smokers, and we have to look for new alternatives for harm reduction for the future, of reducing the risks and reducing the diseases that we always know, particularly cardiovascular diseases that are very important for all of us. So in conclusion, it's very important that we work together in the same direction, have a strategy for harm reduction, and always open your ears. I'm a anti-doctor. You have to open your ears for new products, new alternatives, and it seems to me that the concept a long time ago of tobacco industry is completely different, because if they are going to the FDA approves something else, we have to pay attention to what FDA, and you have to believe what the FDA is doing. And I congratulate yourself, because you're also a believer of the work that the FDA is doing. Unfortunately, we don't have an European system so close to FDA, but we have to believe FDA.
Thank you very much, Professor Clemente. Professor Kuna, 1 minute, please.
Thank you. I have a short statement. I vote for adopting recommendation for management of tobacco addiction, containing all treatment options with tobacco-heated products, as I have shown on my slides, and our societies which recommend this approach to the primary care physician. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Schedel.
Thank you. Well, we found 3 key issues which we are trying to focus. One is the regulation questions, and we have to give advice for the decision makers, because our think tanks in this moment are mainly focusing on COVID. epidemic. So we have to give advice for decision makers. The other one is the ethical questions, which is a working process, but we have to thinking about and speaking about. And the most important is to spread the knowledge and up-to-date knowledge for medical staff, the whole society, and also specific for decision makers. So this is what we want.
Thank you, and we'll close with last comment of Professor Toumbis. Professor, please.
Thank you. WHO is the leading authority in tobacco control. FCTC was adopted in 2005, and it is adopted about 181 countries. So it is, unfortunately, harm reduction is not adopted by FCTC. So we have to work in order to convince the FCTC to adopt the harm reduction, because it is an integral part of the tobacco control. I hope that in a near future, we are going to have the adoption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think on this very interesting subject, like how to provide guidance on alternative smoking products and the controversy on this, the closure of Professor Toumbis was a very good one, giving us again the size and the magnitude of the problem globally, and although something that comes every day more in our lives, how still we are not able to recognize the elephant in the room, just trying to avoid seeing reality. Thank you very much to everybody for being on time, for giving very interesting contributions from all over the world. Have a nice day, and we continue with the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.